C. Thomas Howell, welcome to An Actor Despairs. How are you doing, man?
Thanks for having me.
It means so much. You're such an incredible actor. When I started this show, the career that you've had and everything that you've done in your time in this business is literally the reason I started it. So having you on today, and I know you and my producer Dean go back a long time, it really means so much to me. So from the bottom of my heart, thank you for your time.
Absolute pleasure. Thank you for having me.
As my guests know, and sorry, as my audience knows, I always start at the beginning. Where did you grow up?
Um, I was based in Southern California, was raised just a little bit north of Los Angeles. My father, his entire life, was a professional stuntman before he retired. And I've always been real close to the business and sort of grew up thinking I would get into stunts in some way. My dream as a child, and even still today, if I could have picked a path, my dream was to be a professional cowboy. I was raised by my father was the bull rider for 10 years before he got into doing stunts. And back in the day, all the stunt guys were cowboys because of course, all the Westerns and, the toughest guys in the world were always rodeo cowboys. So, my father raised me to be a cowboy, and I figured I'd be doing stunts as well. And at a very young age, I started getting into the business a little bit, mainly as a stunt kid. I was doing commercials because I could ride horses, and I was real active. And
Like rodeo style, or
well, yeah, I did a Kool-Aid commercial where we were horseback riding, and a Dr. Pepper commercial, and being raised around movie sets. I always just felt really comfortable there. And one day when I was younger, director my father was working with came up and said, "Look, we're looking to cast a young boy to play this role next week. Do you think your son would be interested?" And I started talking to the people and began acting a little bit. And then when I was 13, I did E.T.
what
And
was that like? Spielberg, I mean, the pinnacle of launching that. Was that a weird transition for you, going from kind of this athletic, stunt performance based to a totally different
well,
medium?
ironically, the fact that I was physically capable to do a lot of the bike riding was a big reason I got the role. So, interesting story. My father picks me up from school. I'm 13 years old, and like I said at the time, all I cared about was riding my horses, and I was competing in junior rodeo back then, like 1979, 1980, 1981. I was California State all-around champion in junior rodeo, and it was a major part of my life. And he picked me up and he says, "We're going to go see a gentleman named Steven Spielberg, and you have to talk to him about this part that's available in a movie that he's doing." And at the time, it was called A Boy's Life. And I said, "Okay." I didn't know who Steven Spielberg was at 13, and wasn't really affected by his credits or who he was. And my father, on the way down, hands me a pack of Marlboros and says, here's a book of matches. You have to figure out how to light that because they want somebody that'll smoke a cigarette." And I was like, "Okay." So, I'm on my way down, choking on these cigarettes, turning green. We get to the studio, and we walk into the casting room, and there's 5 other guys that all look like John Stamos, piercing blue eyes and black feathered hair. And then there was me. And I said, "Daddy, let's get out of here. They're going to go with one of these guys. I'm not like them, let's go." And he said, "Just wait. And one by one, they went in and came out. And it was finally my turn. And I walked in, and there was Kathleen Kennedy and Frank Marshall, of course, the producers of
Wow.
Raiders of the Lost Ark, and Steven himself, and Mike Fenton and Marcy Learoff, the casting people, and a few other suits and some assistants, and a stool on a little makeshift stage with some bright lights, and asked me to sit down. And I started talking to Steven. And of course, he was looking at my little 13-year-old mock-up resume and saw that I'd done some commercials, and was impressed. My father was a stunt man, asked if I could ride the bike, and I told him my rodeo career and bike riding was pretty easy. And he handed me a singular page that had some dialogue on it and said, "Here, let's read this together." And I read some of the lines with him, and he gets to the point where he says, "So, kid, how do you feel about smoking a cigarette?" And I kind of fished around and pulled out a rumpled pack of Marlboros and stuck a bent cigarette in my mouth and started to strike a match. He goes, "Okay, kid, you got the part." So
Wow.
that was my first real role in a feature film. And even though I didn't have a significant role, I'd say I was there on and off for about a 3-month period.
Wow.
It was top-notch security. To this day, I never read the script. Every day before I come in, they'd hand me my pages and they'd say, "Learn these lines." They were really careful with getting the script out, and everybody had security badges and had to be cleared before they got on the set. And it was incredible working with Steven. He was working with Steven and then moving on to Francis Ford Coppola and The Outsiders. Two things that they had in common was the fact that they handled the technical aspect of things as well as the creative side. A lot of times, as you get somebody that's really good at one of those.
Yeah.
You might come from the crew, you might be a DP, or you might be a writer. And when you're a writer, you're secluded in a room and you're possibly your communication skills aren't the greatest. But guys like Coppola and Spielberg do it all very well. They are extremely gifted communicators. And Steven didn't treat us like kids, really. He treated us like friends and really cared about everybody on the set. And there was a family aspect both to he and Francis when working with them that isn't really experienced today. Times have really changed a lot. We spend a lot of time rehearsing, and they don't have money for that on sets today. That's one of the first things that goes to be cut out is they'll bring you in at the last second and they get you out as quickly as they can. But back in the day, they used to spend a lot of time rehearsing and getting to know you as a person, and I would have the opportunity to get to know the other actors. So when we finally rolled film, which also we don't do anymore because everything's videotaped, but when we finally rolled film, there was a real connection and a trust and a bond that already existed with everybody. So I never really felt like I was working back in the 80s. I was always inspired to be there on time, and my father taught me to show up on time, be prepared to make those around me better. And you don't see that a lot with the younger actors today. And every once in a while there's an exception, but people want to be famous, but they don't want to do the work to get them there. And it was a different thing back then for me. I was interested in doing the work and learning, and I wanted to be on the set. I wasn't distracted with devices and social media and video games and computers and all these other things that I think are a real challenge for our young people today. And
100%.
Communication and working and learning and studying, and those were all character defining and character building aspects to being a better artist. And that was I was really lucky to grow up in at that time and experience that.
Thank you for saying that. I mean, your work is incredible in The Outsiders. I mean, talk to me about going from E.T. at this point to then singularly the lead in that film. Did you feel like you got bitten by the bug and performing and acting really kind of became something you were interested in after your time on E.T.?
Again, my dream was to be a professional cowboy.
Wow.
And whatever it took to build my bank account to help me in my future years to achieve that was my goal.
Wow.
I think that also gave me a leg up when it was time to meet Francis Ford Coppola and start auditioning for the role of Ponyboy in The Outsiders. I wasn't aware of the weight, the
Mm.
importance. And I wasn't burdened by the fact that I was dealing with, you know, Academy Award winning artists at that
Right.
point. Um, the process for The Outsiders was unlike anything else that I'd really been a part of. And, you know, usually back then when you would go into audition, you'd go to a casting office and you'd wait on a couch outside with 4, 5, 6 other people. And, somebody would go in and you could even hear them working through the thin doors, and you would get your shot. You'd go in and you would read your part and you would leave. But Francis created more of a workshop environment than
Mm.
an auditioning process. And I remember going to Zoetrope Studios for one of the big casting days that he had. And this was after, a few weeks of meeting him one-on-one and going through that process. And we went to Zoetrope and we're on like stage 7. And there's a little makeshift set in the middle of this giant sound stage. And I'd say there's probably 30, 35 people, all young people from 25 to basically 18. I was always one of the youngest there.
Got it.
And there were people like Robert Downey Jr. and Val Kilmer and Mickey
Oh,
Rourke and Tom Cruise and Dennis Quaid and
Patrick Swayze.
Michael Anthony Hall. And I mean, literally the list just went on and on and on of some of the most creative and fantastic actors of our generation. And we all kind of formed this semicircle. And Francis would just point out, he would be like, okay, Robert, you and Tom and Val and Tommy, you guys go over here and do scene 7. You just come home from the Rumble. Let's read that scene. And we'd all play our parts, and everybody would be standing there watching us.
Wow.
And then he'd switch it up and he'd say, okay, Matt, you're going to play Derry. Rob, we want you to play Steve, and Laith, you play Dally. And everybody's was reading all these different roles. Of course, I was the youngest, so I was always only reading the Ponyboy part. My innocence at the time, and when you look back at some of the videotape, because
I saw some of those. Yeah.
He archived all that. And, a lot of people showed up in their jean jackets and their T-shirts and their greased hair. And I showed up in a Sesame Street T-shirt. And, really had no pretense when I approached the work. And also wasn't impressed by the credits and the hoopla that went along with an artist like Francis. So I think he recognized that and understood that, I didn't have a studio mother or a manager, dressing me and rehearsing my lines over and over and pushing me out there and hoping I got the part to benefit themselves.
Yeah.
My father ran a ranch and was a stunt man, and, had both boots on the ground. And, I wasn't allowed to behave like a movie star. I cleaned stalls and had chores to do. And I think growing up in a rural environment and taking care of animals, whether it was, veterinary issues or just day-to-day, feeding and watering and caring, it made auditions for me a lot easier, because I was riding steers and riding bulls and team roping and riding horses and roping and I was in the spotlight in the rodeo arena at a young age. So, standing in front of a camera with a few guys reading some lines, to me was not stressful. Getting on a 1,200-pound bull
Yeah.
when I was 13 or 14 was stressful for me. So I had a very different experience, and I really had nothing to lose, because I had no responsibilities. I had no mouths to feed, no bills to pay. So it was all fun. And it wasn't really about the outcome. It was about the experience
Right.
and the process and the journey. And, they talk about that now. They say, look, a lot of actors, they tense up during auditions, and that's because they're holding on to the outcome. They really want the part. I've never gotten a role that I,
It's desperate.
expressed to somebody that I wanted. I've gotten a lot of roles walking into the room, asking somebody if I could go in front of them because I had something else to do,
Right.
and dropping my audition and getting the hell out. So, I've coined a phrase that I remind myself about every audition and every opportunity to have an audience, because that's really what an audition is. It's an opportunity to perform for somebody. And, for me, I'm 100% committed, but I'm 110% unattached. So that allows me to really focus on the work, serve something up, and then walk away from it and not call my agent afterwards. Did they like me? Do I have a chance? Am I going to get a call back? That dilutes your own self-value when you start holding on to the outcome and hoping and wishing for something, whether it's a role or whatever it is just confirming that you don't have it.
Yeah.
So if I can let something go 100% and know that the right thing is going to come, then I can attract it, and I can become a part of something and add to it and bring some value to it instead of taking from it. And once I really understood that as an artist, my work changed and I became a much better actor.
Do you feel like when The Outsiders came out, it being the sensational movie that it is, it really changed your life in a lot of ways, from having been on this time on this set and then now it's received and, so to speak, fame starts to happen to you? Was that a crazy time in your life?
Again, and this sounds odd, but it wasn't until I was about 17 years old, and I'd done probably, I don't know, 6, 7, 8 movies, before I really decided that I wanted to do it for my life. It was a struggle for me because, rodeo and the training that I put into that was intense. It would be the equivalent to like somebody being in the Junior Olympics. You go to the gym every single day and you're working every single day to be the best you could possibly be as a gymnast. And then all of a sudden somebody comes up to you and says, do you want to be an actor? You say, well, I'll do the role, but I really want to be a gymnast. And all that work, I'm training with the best in the world. I'm putting everything I have into something that at a very young age, I was considered to be one of the top candidates to become a world champion. And my father, made sure I was training with the best in the world. So for me to really let go of that dream to follow my life's path was tough. I when The Outsiders came out, it had sort of a lukewarm acceptance. It wasn't this sort of, it wasn't a part of America, like American pop culture like it is today. I've probably seen 1 million stay gold tattoos in my
It's life. On Broadway right now here.
It's on Broadway. Yeah. It's a big, part of the curriculum in about 70% of the schools across America. It's required reading. And I'd say another 70% of those schools probably screen the film afterwards. It's a big part of growing up for a lot of people. Yeah. I've read a lot of stories and I've been told a lot of stories by people who have said, I read that book to my mother as she was passing away. It was her favorite book and favorite movie. Or, I watched that movie with my kids once a year, no matter what. And,
it's my dad's favorite movie.
Well, it wasn't like that when it came out. It kind of snowballed, and here we are now. It's a big part of a lot of people's lives, and to the point where they, ingrain their skin with ink that reminds them of it every single day. And it's, you know, an iconic cast: Tom Cruise, Patrick Swayze,
Yeah,
Rob
God.
Lowe, Ralph Macchio,
Neil
um,
Estevez.
you know, everybody, Diane Lane, and you know, to come to be a part of that, and to be to look back and see that that's where we all started and where we all came from. You know, I'm really proud of that. And everybody is so supportive and kind. And whenever, you know, I see somebody, whether it's Diane Lane or Tom Cruise or Matt Dillon, and they're promoting one of their, you know, films today, inevitably the Outsiders is brought up, and a big smile comes across their face, and they have such wonderful things to share and say about it that you know, it's rare that
Yeah.
that sort of impact will be sort of carried on so proudly by so many that experienced a very similar thing that I experienced back then in the day.
Wow, that's so beautiful. And I know you did so many other amazing films like Red Dawn. And then at what point did you start to kind of like, was it in the 90s and 2000s that you started doing a lot of television?
So, you know, I did The Hitcher with Rutger Hauer and Jennifer Jason Leigh and Jeffrey DeMond, and that was the experience for me that really made me go, okay, maybe I need to reconsider my life's goals and take this a little more seriously, and study my craft and do this for the rest of my life. And that's where I really fell in love with the process.
Wow.
And I'd say I struggled a bit in my early 20s because you're no longer a teenager, and I was making a living, you know, playing a teenager, and I could do that well. You're not a man yet, so there's this void that you have to, and that's where a lot of people leave the business when they start out as a child actor. There's a void that you have to embrace because the roles aren't there anymore. And for me, it was a tough time because, you know, I had a very successful childhood, and I decided to give up my dream of being a professional cowboy.
Yeah.
And then I hit this wall in my early 20s, and I really, you know, had to reevaluate and figure out what was going on in my life at the time. And I started to, you know, experience projects and do some things that I probably shouldn't have done to be able to pay bills. And, you know,
totally. Got to survive.
I met somebody and got married at a young age, and we had kids, and that put a lot of pressure on me.
Wow.
And the business had changed for me at that point, and I wasn't really as content as I was when I was younger, and I struggled for a good period. And then, you know, in my 30s, I started to do, you see, back then when I was younger, film actors didn't do TV, and TV actors couldn't really get film jobs. It was a very different experience than today. Of course,
Harrison Ford doing your show, you know, it's crazy.
Streaming, streaming has changed everything. So, you know, and that's also made it harder again because, you know, when I went to TV, I was a filmmaker that decided to do television, so I had a leg up again. And then I did roles on Criminal Minds where I played the Reaper and sort of reinvented myself, and I started playing character roles. And once I discovered that I could do that, of course, those roles became meatier and challenged me more. And I really love a good challenge. So, you know, I was offered this role in Criminal Minds to play a serial killer, and I hadn't been offered any villains up until that point. I remembered when I was 17 on the set of The Hitcher, Rutger Hauer invited me into his trailer to have a lunch one day, and I was sitting there in stone cold silence for what felt like an eternity, but it was probably for about 10 minutes. as I was eating by myself and he was chain smoking his filterless cigarettes and staring out the window. I finally, out of just sheer terror, mustered up the courage to say, listen, Rutger, everybody says you're, the most amazing villain ever. What's your secret to playing bad guys? And he takes this long drag off his cigarette and he leans in with that thick Dutch accent and he exhales in my face and he says, I don't play bad guys. And that really tripped me out. I didn't understand what the hell he meant. I picked up my tray and got the hell out of his trailer. And that rattled around in my head for, a good 20 years. And I was offered the George Foyet role on Criminal Minds. And I finally was old enough to really go back to that space and recall what he had said to me. And it really hit me that, his success in playing the roles that he played was the fact that he could take somebody that did evil, dark things and inject humanity into that character. Yeah. And that made him absolutely terrifying because he didn't play bulletproof and fearless. He played a character that wasn't afraid to show empathy, love, understanding while he was cutting your heart out. Yeah. So that I was able to take into my role on Criminal Minds and had great success with. And once I did that role, my life really started to change. And of course, I spent 5 years on Southland, where I played the role of Dewey, who also was, an important character for me, a very unlikable, broken, flawed human who was, racist, alcoholic, misogynist, all the traits that nobody likes. And I wanted to inject him with, as we already stated, due to Rutger, with humanity. And by the time you start seeing that character, by the 5th season, you absolutely loved him. Yeah. And people say that to me all the time. My God, I loved and hated your character on Criminal Minds. I loved and hated your character on Southland. And that, to me, is a job well done. So I search for those broken, flawed characters that give me the opportunity to do despicable things, but in the same sense, fill that character with love and humanity and empathy and understanding. Yeah. And that gives him a round, full body of emotions. And it's not some sociopath that's disconnected that, one note. Yeah. And I struggle when I see villains that know they don't die till page 90. So they'll run through a hail of bullets, or if you're stabbing somebody, they do that fake laugh. Yeah. And that makes me crazy because I don't care who you are. If you're stabbing somebody, you're not laughing, man, no. And if you watch somebody like Rutger do it, he's literally, his heart is breaking while he's doing it. And there's something so beautiful about watching a grown man who's not afraid to express a full body of emotions, as opposed to disassociating himself and just playing that one note, as you just said. And once I really understood the depth of that and the meaning of that, my career changed. My career changed for the better. And I started playing roles that I was really excited about again after I struggled through my early 20s.
Animal Kingdom, so many amazing things that you did. I mean, talk to me then as the business, to kind of build our way to 1923. We went through this period of this incredible TV, so much of what you did, in the early days, like, I know you went on Sons of Anarchy. And then, at this point, the business was kind of leaving LA as it once was the epicenter of entertainment. And there started being productions in New Mexico and Texas. At a certain point, did you move to Texas to go back to?
I'm in Texas now. Basically I left LA. And really it was for more personal reasons. I ended up getting a divorce after a 20 plus year marriage. I'd raised my kids. They were, grown and going to college. And the business had really shifted, and a lot of work was taking place in Atlanta.
Yeah.
And I moved to Georgia for about 6 years and worked all the time there. Did, a run on The Walking Dead. And, I did a year on Ray Donovan and was working really on the top shows and enjoying it immensely. And for me, getting out of Los Angeles and really, I never was really embraced by Hollywood from that aspect. I wasn't a red carpet kid. I didn't go to Hollywood parties. I've never been to an award show. Of course, I've never been nominated, but I mean, a lot of people go to these banquets and go to these dinners and
when they're not nominated,
just to be seen. Like, I don't go to screenings or premieres, and that may or may not have had an effect on me getting other roles, but I just wasn't interested in that. I never felt, and I think it was because of the way I was raised. I mean, when you're raised by a professional bull rider turned stuntman, I mean, my father earned his living by kicking death's ass.
Yeah.
And there was really no nonsense. There was no, I was raised to allow my work to speak for myself, not to go to parties and sort of beg for a part because, I was really nice to a producer.
Right.
And that may or may not have had a big effect on me having a bigger career.
But you're true and sincere guy. I mean, that's not a great way to operate.
And that, a lot of people say, why don't you dye your gray hair or I'm not a filler guy. You know what I mean?
Right.
I live on a ranch. I'm on a ranch right now. I clean stalls and I have chickens and horses and like, I want to play, character roles. I'm not interested in being 60 pretending I'm 45.
God.
And I don't mean to disparage anybody, but when I'm watching Sylvester Stallone run through a jungle with his face filled with filler and dyed hair, man. I'm like, really? I have a hard time embracing this character.
Same.
I'd rather see him aging and doing that. Like Clint Eastwood or Tommy Lee Jones. I'm like, those are badasses. Ed Harris. These are people that I admire. Like I watch Tom Hardy's work, and I'm like, that guy's not going to be filled with filler and dyeing his hair and pretending to be 40 when he's 55. I mean, these are the guys that I look up to. These are the guys that I want to work with and I want to emulate. And I think people that aren't lucky enough to live in a rural environment, to get up in the morning and have responsibilities, whether I'm on my tractor or like I said, riding a colt or whatever my duty is, spending a lot of time in Los Angeles and having a lot of friends that live there and they're happy. And again, I don't mean to disparage anybody, but getting up in the morning and going to Starbucks and going to the gym day after day after day after day is not a life.
It's Groundhog Day. No way.
It's not life. And you look at everybody and, they're getting face work done and they're trying to keep up with the Joneses and you ask the kids today, like, what do you want to do when you get older? They'll say, oh, I want to be an influencer.
God.
Well, then you ask them, well, what do you want to do that will allow you to influence somebody? Nobody has the answer to that. They just want to be famous. The likes. They want to be famous. And for me, that's all soul sucking and very depleting.
It's vapid and hollow. It's awful.
And as a human, and I never fit into that program. So moving to Atlanta was an opportunity for me to reinvent myself again, because eventually COVID hit and the business shut down. And my whole life, I really, was attracted to musicians and
you
the
played,
road,
correct, right?
Dude, yeah. And that's when I decided to pick up a guitar at that point. And and start writing songs. And I ended up discovering that I had a real knack for that. And, having spent 45 years in the 2-hour storytelling format,
Yeah.
made it a real easy transition into the 2-minute storytelling format. So I moved to Nashville and started hanging out with some really awesome songwriters. And I've got my second album ready to come out now, and
Amazing.
it's basically all part of the process. It's about connecting with people. And I gotta show you this. Look, I don't know if you can see my chickens right there.
Wow. Oh man.
They just came up to the porch and said hello.
I love that.
Anyway, my passion is just connecting with people, Ryan, and telling stories and sharing a part of my life, however I can, wherever I can. And being out here and chainsawing a fallen tree or mucking a stall makes me a better actor in the long run, and if I don't get a part, I don't care. And thank God today everything is, pretty much self-taped. And if we do audition, we just do it at home and we send it in, and
let it go.
Don't think twice about it. If you get the call, you get the call. I love Taylor Sheridan's work.
Yeah, talk to me about this, because it seems like such a natural intersection for you growing up and doing rodeo. Like, did you know Taylor through the Texas scene? Because I know he's got the
No, I've still never have met Taylor. He
really?
was in the middle of
wow.
He was in the middle of wrapping up Yellowstone when I shot my episodes on 1923, and I was excited because I got the call from John Papsadera and laid down some tape, and for him, and he's an amazing casting director, and I let it go. I hadn't heard for about 2 or 3 weeks, and I get the call and they said, "Hey, can you be in Austin on Wednesday?" And it was like Monday, and I was like, yeah. And off I went. And I have to tell you, I've been blessed, and I've been in this business for almost 50 years, and that was the biggest set I've ever been on. The biggest crew. There was 300 crew members. There were trucks for miles and miles and miles long. There were times when we would have 9 cameras on the set.
Wow.
I've never seen anything like it. It was an amazing experience for me, and extremely motivating and inspirational. And, to be 58, I'll be 59 this year, given the opportunities to work with people like, Taylor Sheridan, and allowing these roles to help me grow as an artist. Still, I still learn every time I go to work, and try to apply what I've learned from my past to what I'm doing. And just, that's really my goal, just really being grateful and thankful for the jobs that I do. And more importantly, knowing the jobs to turn down,
right?
Knowing when I feel like, oh, that's a money job for me, I'm not passionate about that, and I think somebody else should play that part that would be very grateful to have it, but that's not something that I want to do. And that's something I think a lot of younger actors don't do enough. And it's difficult because as a young actor, you're working so hard to get an offer, and when you get an offer, you automatically just take it. And I really respect and admire the actors that are brave enough to turn down the roles that they should turn down and trust the process. Because when you turn down a role, you're telling the universe that you're making room for the right role to come to you. And, I think people struggle with feeling like, as an actor, when we finish a job, and you know this, whenever we finish something, we always have that feeling, oh, we might not ever work again,
Oh man, it's going through it right now.
So when something comes around, it's difficult to say no. But I think if we can find a way to support ourselves outside the business so we don't have to take every job, we don't always have to play the juggling clown.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's like, it's a very difficult thing for us to do. And 1% of the actors are making Marvel movies, man.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's a tough business right now because we're in a recession. Hollywood's in a recession. Everybody talked about COVID, and then we had 2 strikes back to back, and everybody was just saying survive till 25. Well, here we are on 25.
It's not any better.
Changed.
Yeah,
nothing's changed. I mean, you go on Netflix and you see all the Korean dramas, Italian, all the European shows, and you say, well, what is all this? Well, they just have to pay a licensing fee for that, so it's incredibly inexpensive for them to be able to put that programming on. People are watching it. It looks like their shelves are full, but nobody's really spending money and creating content. And then, you look at something like Rebel Moon that comes out. Well, they spend $350 million on, and
nobody watches.
This is not that great.
No.
And instead of spending $350 million on one project, why don't you make 25 projects?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? 30 projects for 10 million. I mean, it baffles my mind, the thinking process that goes into these decisions. But I think we got away from really good storytelling for a while.
100%.
We almost got to the point to where, and nobody goes to the theater anymore, but it felt like we were going to the theater. We'd get our popcorn, we'd sit down, an explosion would begin, and it would last for 2 hours.
Literally.
And then the explosion would end, and you'd be like, that was awesome. Okay, let's go. And there was no heart. There was no soul. There was no, I didn't feel like I was learning anything. And that's where I really struggle with the Marvel stories, and even the product that Disney has been putting out for a long time. I mean, when they took over the Star Wars stories, I was so elated. I was like, this is great. We're going to get some great stuff. And I'm still waiting for the great
I know,
stuff.
man. I think we all are. Oh, it's so bad.
And it was just shocking to see that these great people, the Favreaus, the Kathleen Kennedys, putting out the material that they were putting out. And that they were being stifled
by corporations
who were above them, because they're such great, incredible content creators that I just don't know what happened for a long time. I think agendas were being pushed in different medias, and people didn't want to go to the movies and have an agenda shoved down their throat.
100%.
They wanted to see
humans go through something.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I think that's where Taylor Sheridan really conquered the market.
100%.
Whether
Hell or High Water, I mean, it's a masterpiece.
I mean, Sicario,
God.
Wind River. I mean, what a master he is. I mean, we're not even talking about his hits: Yellowstone, Landman, Lioness. Just The King of Tulsa, which I haven't seen, but he puts out such an incredibly profound amount of work that has value and meaning to so many people. And I think we're finally coming back to that slowly, but it's been tough. It's been a tough ride. I have a lot of friends that haven't worked in a long time, and I've seen a drop in what I'm doing, and things have slowed down, but I have hope that it's coming back, and
we need it. The world is a better place when we have a booming business and, better stories.
100%.
It makes all the things going on in the world easier to find catharsis in, and
it's an interesting time, and it's still early in 2025, but I'm really hoping it'll turn around and all of us will get a shot to do things that we all deserve to do. But in the meantime, we got to figure out a way how to hunker down and hang out and stay creative. And that's where, for me, music comes into play. And
is filmmaking something that you like, directing, you find a call?
Yeah, I'm working on 3 things right now.
Can you talk about any of them at all, or
or
one of them?
I'm this far away from coming and sharing stuff with you. But
Well, you'll have to come back when
that
that
would be
time comes.
great.
Yeah, I
That'd
would
be
love
great,
that.
man.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, C. Thomas Howell, man, you're an incredible artist. This was one of the greatest conversations I've ever had, and your insights are incredible. And I really appreciate everything that you had to say about your business and your perspective. And I just know so many great things are going to continue to happen. It's so awesome to watch you soar in 1923, and you're so interesting, and you've had such an amazing career. And I just hope you know how awesome and how grateful I am for your time today.
Man, I appreciate it. Like I said, I meant no disrespect to anything that we brought up. It's just we have to recognize and give credit to those that deserve it, and point at those that don't. And
Yeah.
um, I'm not really one to criticize. It's better to create and not criticize than to criticize and not create. But for me, it's just about trying to grow, be better, Ryan, and make those around me better. And I can't thank you enough for letting me come on and
Oh, it means so much. And so I can
having a
plug it.
moment with you. We had a nice exchange today, so thank
Oh,
you.
beautiful. And so I can plug it. Where can people check out your album, and when might that be coming
So,
out?
my music is on all platforms: Spotify, iTunes, wherever you would download your music. My first album is called American Storyteller. My second album is called Damned Good Man. That's coming out now. But please, if you're interested in some good stories and some good music, go check it out.
See, Thomas House, so much love, and I'm going to say it to be continued, okay?
Thank you, sir.